What initially triggered my first big bout with depression was my career situation. It was a situational trigger that made me feel the way I did. But as I've spoken about before, I feel like I am predisposed to these negative feelings because of how my brain is wired and has been wired since I was a kid. So it was the career situation that was the trigger for me, and that's how my big bout with depression in 2011, 2012 really came about. But it was then, after I quit my job and started to figure out what I was going through, that I realized that the situation is only the trigger. It's not necessarily the cause of the depression. And like I said, I feel like my brain is wired a certain way, and certain things can force it to act and think in a certain way that results in me being less than ideal and unhealthy mentally. These are the kind of things that I had to discover on my own, and with the support of doctors, doctor's appointments, my family doctor, and talking about this kind of stuff with him at the time, to really get a sense of what I was dealing with. And what I learned was that it's not only the situation that can be a trigger. There are other triggers, and some of them are biological, like your body just having lower levels of certain hormones, and there are different reasons why people become depressed. But with that being said, there are similar ways that people can deal with depression and actually get a handle of it and get better. And so I wanted to share a couple of the ways that I coped with it after I quit my job, to just remove myself from the situation that was a trigger for me every day, and to allow myself to have the time to deal with it. So I did mention that I went to the doctor, and the doctor did diagnose me with moderate depression. And I, at that point, started to try and get a handle of it on my own. I wasn't prescribed medication at that time. The doctor actually suggested that I read a book about mental health and dealing with it by Dr. Ken Burns, I believe is Ken Burns. No, that doesn't sound right. I think Ken Burns is a video effect. Yeah, I think it is. Anyways, Dr. David Burns, Dr. Burns. It was called the Feeling Good Handbook, and that book went through this doctor's route of I guess diagnosing people and treating people with mental illness and anxiety and all these things. And what he had found was that the brain can actually be rewired to think a certain way. And the cause of a lot of people's issues was that their brain was, over time, because of these triggers that they dealt with and the continued negative nature of their situations, for example, the brain was wired in a certain way and then began to think and act a certain way. So the book that was recommended to me explained to me that the brain can be rewired with certain things, and one of those practices is called cognitive behavioral therapy. And that book was a handbook. Not only did it explain what the issue was and what the treatment CBT was, but it actually helped the people who were reading it deal with their depression, for example, in practical ways, give tools to assess, and then tools to deal with the issues as they arose, and hopefully rewire the brain to deal with things better. I didn't get through the whole book. It was a pretty big book, but what I did read was pretty revolutionary to me, in that, one, it told me that my brain can change and that I can help train it to return to a state that was a lot healthier. But the other thing that it did was enable me with this, this morsel of knowledge at the time that I had no idea existed before. And so that was sort of opening the door to me to really realize that things can be done and I can help myself. And so I went on a journey of trying to help myself as best as possible, to equip myself with the most amount of knowledge to deal with it. But knowledge is only one way to deal with depression. So the one major thing I took from the book was that I can deal with things on my own, and I can help myself get better. And I took a couple specific tools from that book that, I tried to employ on a day-to-day basis. And just that knowledge and reading what I was going through allowed me to think from outside of myself. So an example of that was the doctor outlining several ways of thinking that are common with people who are mentally ill and who are going through bouts of mental illness. So one of those ways of thinking is black and white thinking. Like a situation is either black or white, that there is no gray. But if we live in real life, that's rarely the case. There's always some gray. But when you're in a negative mental state, you only see things in black and white. So if you know that, that's one way of thinking that people who are dealing with mental illness and are struggling mentally have, then you're able to catch yourself in those moments. And so there are a ton more examples of this, but of different types of thinking that you can catch yourself in. But I began to catch myself thinking certain ways, and as soon as I did, I was almost immediately able to take myself out of that situation and realize, okay, maybe this is just my brain playing tricks on me, and I don't actually have to think this way. And it kind of diffused the feeling that I was having at that time. But that was only one way that I started to deal with the depression that I was having. The other way that I dealt with it was more physical. One was exercise. I realized that the more I exercise, the more I felt better. And it seems obvious, but there's a reason for that. And the knowledge that I acquired in talking to the doctor and reading a lot about what I was going through told me that exercise gives you a boost of serotonin, and serotonin is what controls, is the hormone that controls the brain, the mood in the brain. So the more you exercise, the more of it you have, the better you feel, and that's true. I felt it, so I tried to exercise regularly. But the biggest physical benefit that I realized that helped in my dealing with depression was eating healthy. And this is not necessarily around the same timeline of me realizing that I was depressed and getting over it. It was later down the road, but it was something that really made a big difference for me, and that was eating whole food. So I read the book. It starts with food, and it's about the Whole30 way of eating. I don't want to call it a diet because you eat a lot. It's not a diet, but Whole30 is basically eating only whole foods. So fruits, vegetables, meats, healthy fats, nothing that you can't get from the ground, for example. And even potatoes, which you can get from the ground, and legumes, which you can get from the ground or trees or whatever, were not allowed because of some of the negative implications with the food. So the book that I read really helped me understand what different types of foods did to the body, and then what to look out for in terms of how I might feel better when I cut these foods out of my diet. So for 30 days, I went by the book, quite strict, only ate fruits, vegetables, meats, and healthy fats like nuts and avocados and olive oil and olives and coconut milk. And the book suggested that your inflammation, your joints and aches and pains would be gone in 30 days, and that you'd be physically stronger in 30 days if you were to exercise and eat this way. And third and finally, and most importantly, and it might not be the only other thing, but certainly for me, most importantly, was that if you're depressed or anxious or socially awkward or whatever you want to call it, you don't like social situations, if you're dealing with mental struggles and mental illness, you will feel better in 30 days. And it was a lot to actually believe that just changing the way you eat can do this in 30 days in a short period of time. But at the beginning of the month, I was depressed. I was certainly sad and irritable and anxious and achy physically, not feeling strong physically or mentally. I avoided social situations as much as possible. I didn't want to talk to people if I didn't have to. And I was maybe at my worst, which is why we decided to do that, the whole 30 program. And by the end of the 30 days, the example I use is I was looking forward to going to a dinner with people I didn't know who were relatives of my wife at that time, because we were married at that point and still are. But I was looking forward to going to a dinner party with elderly people who I didn't know and who were my in-laws. That was unheard of 30 days ago. The inflammation, the aches and pains were gone. I had muscle on my body because I was going to the gym and eating healthy, and it came to me so much quicker than any other time that I had been exercising in my life. And like I said, most importantly, the fog was gone. Mentally, I was clear. I was calm. I could deal with issues, and I wanted to be around people because I felt at my best. So eating healthy is and removing the sugars and the carbs and the unnecessary foods that don't do good for your body and actually do harm for your body, based on the science that was presented in this book, was revolutionary for me. It was difficult, though, to actually eat that way, and I haven't actually been able to do it like that since then. And I've never felt as clear mentally as I did during that period. And so putting in the time and the effort did actually work in that case. There are a couple other things, 2 more things that I wanted to talk about in terms of coping and dealing with depression that have helped me along. And one of them is the doctor in a different respect, and that's a psychologist. So I started seeing a registered psychologist probably, let's say, like 3 years after I first started dealing with depression. And I was skeptical because of the knowledge that I was acquiring. I felt like I knew everything that I needed to know. I just needed to be better. Like, I needed to exercise more. I needed to eat better. I needed to avoid situations that were not the best for me, like the jobs that I didn't want and all that. And if I could do all that, I'd be fine. But it was tough to do all that. So I wasn't fine. So I decided that I'd try out the registered psychologist because, hey, why not? Nothing to lose. Even though I felt like there's nothing that anybody could tell me that I didn't know. And while I think that might still have been true when I went there was nothing really profound that I was told. Just being able to talk it out with someone and have them understand the feelings that I was going through. And then further to that, having them immediately pinpoint the thought pattern that caused the feelings that I was having. And then, so it was threefold. Just talking to someone, the immediate pinpointing of the thought pattern and reason why I was thinking and feeling that way. And the third thing was the immediate practical feedback that was given. So if you think this way, that next time, this is what you should do or say to yourself to avoid the situation. And a lot of those practical pieces of information and tips really came in handy. And so just with 4 or 5 sessions, maybe it was more, but not a whole lot more, I felt like I had gotten better. And so I was wrong for sure about there not being benefit to a psychologist. And I didn't continue with that psychologist for many reasons. One, because I moved away from that area and it was hard for me to get there. But 2, because I felt like I was better and I actually didn't need as much support on a regular basis. Now, I've changed my tune since then, because when times get tough and you're out of practice, that's how you get beaten down again over time. But with that being said, not everyone can afford a psychologist for a long period of time. But knowing that it works and knowing that you can go back from time to time to get a little boost, that's helpful to me. And I'm looking for another one right now, not because I'm at my worst, even though I have been better, just because I know it will help me and it'll help me stay at a certain level and baseline that will help me avoid getting to that bottom end. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about that has helped me cope with my mental illness is the support that I have here at home with my wife. And so she's been along with me on this journey since day one. Since when I said looking back, my first bout of depression in university, she was there. She's seen me go through the ups and downs of the person that I am, and she has seen me at my lowest. And to have someone stick by you at your lowest is one thing, but to have a shoulder to cry on, so to speak, to have a sounding board to vent to after work or when things are not going well, to know that there is one thing in your life that remains constant, that remains to be a positive, that you will always have with you, regardless of how bad things get and how shitty you feel about yourself and how worthless you feel, and to know that despite all that, there is some good in your life. That's been one of the most important things to me, if not the most important. I don't know if I would have been able to get through what I was dealing with and deal with regularly without the support. So this is all to say, share what you're feeling with people who you trust, who have shown to be a part of your support network, because it will help you get through it, regardless of you feeling like you're burdening them. And I feel that, and I feel it every day. They want to support you. They want you to feel better. And if this is what you need, if sharing helps, they will want to hear it, regardless of how difficult it is for them. So thank you, Shiva. And if you have someone, consider yourself lucky. And if you don't, find someone to talk to. Call a hotline, go to a support group, or if you can afford it, go to a therapist, because just getting it out and knowing you have someone there to help you through it is really important. So those are the things that have helped me, the knowledge, the exercise, the healthy eating, the support, the therapy. There are a couple other things, philosophically that have helped me. And one of the main things is doing things that I'm wholeheartedly, and only doing things that I'm wholeheartedly for, and avoiding things that I am not wholeheartedly for. Like working a job that you're just, okay with, or doing something that you feel obligated to do out of guilt. Those are the things that bring me down and beat me down. And I've noticed that when I avoid those things, I'm doing well. And when I don't avoid those things, I'm not. One thing that I have avoided, and that other people will say helps, and I'm sure does, is medication. And I have been prescribed medication before, and I've talked about this in a blog, I think, before, but I filled the prescription, but I never actually went and picked it up. And there's just been something about medication that has not sat well with me. One, because of the fear that I have, and that I don't know how I'm going to react to it, and, the side effects, whatever. That's fear, and everyone has it. But the main reason I haven't gone that route is every time I think about it and decide that maybe it is finally time for me to do it, I ask myself the question, like, have I been doing everything that I can be, or at least anything that I can be? The things that I just listed that I know help me, and that I know have helped me in the past. And more often than not, when I'm considering medication and asking for medication because I feel like I can't do it anymore, more often than not, when I ask myself the question, have I been doing those things? I'm not doing any of them. And so that shocks me back into a place where I think that I just need to give myself another shot, because I think I can do it on my own. And it might be my brain playing tricks on me again, but I just feel like I've done it before. When I am taking care of myself and putting myself first with all the things that I listed, I'm fine. I'm doing well. I'm okay, and I can get through the day. It's when I'm not, when I put myself second, that I start to feel that I am at my worst and that I can't go on anymore. And that's when I resort to thinking about medication. And maybe one day I should go there. Maybe it'll help me avoid those lows, and even in the times that I am not taking care of myself to the fullest extent, I'll feel better. But I haven't gotten to that point yet. So if I do, I will update you. So hopefully those are some things that can help others out there too. But that's kind of the journey that I've gone through, and the things that I've tried and succeeded with, and otherwise. Hopefully it helps you too.